Hey everyone, how's it going? Aaron Rift here from NoDQ.com. Welcome to the NoDQ Panel. I am being joined by my guests. First up, he is good old JM, the West Coast professor, Jeff Meacham. We also have the self-proclaimed greatest columnist in NoDQ history, Mr. Virtue. He's got his list there. And join us today as our special guest, we have Charlie. How's it going, Charlie?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
No problem. It's a pleasure
to have you,
on
brother.
today. We are glad to have you on. So today we are going to be discussing the most disappointing matches in wrestling history. And this is a very loaded question. I'm sure we all have a huge list here. I did a poll on NoDQ.com asking fans for their opinions on the most disappointing matches. Now, the number one match is, Jeff.
Before you do anything, I have a catchphrase for Virtue's paper.
What is that?
The list of virtue. Write it down, man. There you go. Good.
All right, so
I'm good.
All right, Jeff, I'm going to ask you, what do you think fans picked as the number one most disappointing match of all time? If you had to take a guess
this is no DQ viewership, so this is primarily WWE fans. Because my answer is totally different. I'm going to go with
whatever you pick. We'll talk about first.
Oh, well, okay. Well, then I'm going to pick what I want to pick first.
No, you're going to pick what you think the fans pick.
Don't swear me, Rift. I think the fans probably picked John Cena versus The Miz from WrestleMania.
That is not even at the top of this list, but that one I agree with. That was a pretty damn lackluster WrestleMania main event. It was more or less an advertisement for WrestleMania 28 with John Cena and The Rock. So I definitely agree. That match was very disappointing, to one of the most disappointing WrestleManias in recent years.
I felt so bad for Mike Mizanin because he worked his ass off as WWE champion the entire time he was champion, and all the WWE was about was Rock versus Cena. Yeah. I felt so bad for him going into that, and the fact that he had to win because Dwayne helped him was so detrimental to his run as champion. It was terrible.
You know what? Like looking back on that match, it deflated. Miz got deflated after that. I mean, remember they tried to put him with R-Truth, and they did, I think. But let's fast forward to today, and even though he's not at the Universal title level like he should be, or WWE Championship level, the Miz is, to me, one of, if not the hottest thing on the show. So it just goes to show, if you're given enough time, you will win people over, and that's exactly what he's done. What do you think, Charlie?
For the what NoDQ picked?
Yeah.
Why not? Why not? Unless you have something to say on Miz and Cena.
Knowing NoDQ, it has to be a Roman Reigns match. It's probably or it has to be a match with Roman. I think that's what I'm going with.
Well, the Roman one was actually, looking on here, it was number 5, Triple H versus Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 32. What do you
Only
think about
5?
That match?
Wow.
Yeah, what do you think about that match, Charlie?
Yeah, I think it was really disappointing. It was for a WrestleMania main event, it was very lackluster. Like, it was an okay match if it wasn't last, maybe, but I don't know. It's just like they tried to put Roman Reigns as the face and Triple H as the heel, but everyone was rooting for Triple H, so that wasn't going to work.
The people that were still awake, I mean, with a 7-hour show, I've said many times,
yes.
Jeff and I were falling asleep at the end. We were watching it at a friend's house, and both of us were just we were struggling to stay awake by the end of that show. So maybe if the circumstances were different, that could have been a better match. But yeah,
dude, Aaron was kept awake by pure rage over losing his hair.
Yeah, because of Zack Ryder, that SOB.
Oh,
dude, I was just waiting for Roman to go over. I loved every bit of that match.
Well, no, I don't mind the finish because we knew Roman was going to win. The execution of the match was just awful.
Predictable, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
Now, Aaron,
Virtue, you haven't figured it out yet. What did the fans pick as the most disappointing match?
This should be it, but again, I should pay more attention to your polls there. Goldberg Brock, WrestleMania 20.
That's it. You got it. That is the number one match.
Yep.
I mean, and Stone Cold was a special referee, and let's go back on that. I mean, that WrestleMania had so many great moments, and then that match. So that didn't help the cause. But what I don't get is it sucks the fact that people knew these guys were leaving the company and mailing it in. I am a firm believer, if that ever happens, like a worker should give it his all until the very end. And that's what, Aaron's livelihood is the real news and finding out when things are going to happen ahead of time, this and that. So I get that. People want to hear about that stuff. I just wish we could have some kayfabe, just a little bit left. So who should I pass it to here? I don't know. Anybody?
I'll take it.
All right.
I looked forward to this match so much because I was going to root for Brock Lesnar because I've never been a fan of Goldberg, and everybody that's been following NoDQ for the last 15 years knows why. And then they announced Brock was going to leave, and it was like, oh, well, now we root for Goldberg because Brock's a traitor. And then they said Goldberg was leaving, and it's like, so we root for double centers? Let's go with that. And it happened. So, yay! Oh, yeah. I am so glad that I became a fan of Goldberg during this last run of WWE. So I'm glad that both Bill and Brock got their opportunity to redeem themselves at a WrestleMania in a decent match for what it was. I'm glad because WrestleMania 20 was definitely the ugly wart on what was a very beautiful face at WrestleMania 20.
Yeah, I agree on that. I mean, it was entertaining as far as being a train wreck goes. Speaking of train wrecks, Sting versus Jeff Hardy, Victory Road, 2011, arguably the lowest point in the history of Impact Wrestling. Charlie, did you see that at the time, and what were your thoughts if you did?
Yes, I did see that at that time. It was, oh my God. Growing up, I was a huge Jeff Hardy fan. I loved him. I, had so much respect for him. He was like one of my heroes. And seeing him just go so downhill like that, really, it was kind of heartbreaking for me, honestly, because it was just really hard to watch. So I'm not even thinking about how disappointing the match was itself, but just how downhill Jeff Hardy went. It was just really hard to see.
Yeah, just in general to see him reach that lowest point, and the fans were just very upset about that whole situation. Virtue, your thoughts on that match, and what would be your top most disappointing match that we haven't discussed so far?
I watched that live. I actually got my money back from my cable provider.
Oh, you did? Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because I was going to go to the competitor, so they said, oh, no. But the fact that they allowed Jeff to go out there, they should have somebody that watches people backstage. I can't believe they let him go out there. So I don't really blame Sting in that situation. And whoever let Jeff go out there, they could have called an audible. They could have said Jeff Hardy can't compete tonight and had Sting face someone else. Why not? My match is, obviously I said the Goldberg and Lesnar match, but I have a few of them here. And I'm going to go with Hogan versus Warrior, Halloween Havoc 98.
Oh, man.
I was so excited for that match. I loved WrestleMania 6, right? Because I was a kid then. I had the Warrior stuff, the promos, the cockpit. It was phenomenal. And we got to see the sequel, right? And I'm in WC, what did they do? I mean, the whole flash paper incident that didn't even work. I was so mad. That's about the time I started. I was probably 60-40, always watching Nitro more than Raw. On a Monday night, I would watch both of them because I could record one and watch the other. But I was 60-40 watching WCW more as it happened. That's the night that I started watching WWE more after that, the next Monday. That's how bad it was. What do you think, Charlie? Do you remember that? Did you watch it on YouTube or?
I didn't see that match particularly, but when you're talking about WCW, I think probably the most disappointing match that they've had was probably Hogan versus Sting at Starrcade '97.
Absolutely.
Because I'm obviously a lot younger than you guys, but I've been watching the network and watching old.
You saying I'm old?
Yeah.
Hey, notice Hogan's in a couple of these already. Oh my gosh.
I forever said he's my favorite for personal reasons. His in-ring work is garbage. Now, let me backtrack a little bit. Sting and Jeff Hardy. Put it this way: when I was working on the dark side, the other channel I used to work for before I came back to the light of NoDQ, my co-host and I each took a picture of Jeff Hardy and tore it up on the air and renounced our fandom of Jeff Hardy because it was that disappointing.
That was the beginning of the broken gimmick, 2011.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's
pretty much.
Yeah, not really, but
Yeah, and then Hogan and Warrior. And you know what? It's so funny. I'm not a huge fan of the WrestleMania 6 match either. I enjoyed the presentation. I enjoyed the feel-good moment for Warrior. But the actual match was a typical Clash of Titans. It wasn't anything monumental to it until the very end. The match at Halloween Havoc was one of those things where WCW was just starting to go downhill 2 months before. That match in particular put logs in the fire of the train.
Yeah,
it's like rapid fire. And I'm glad you mentioned Sting and Hogan, Charlie.
That's what really started it.
Because that's probably my number 1A as far as disappointing matches at a main event level. This match should have been everything to completely secure WCW's spot as the company to take over WWE, to run them out of business, and the worst botched Starrcade finish ever. It just leads to everything going downhill.
It was weird because they spent 16 months building it up, and Sting was pretty much indestructible. He was taking out the NWO, and then he comes out there, he's selling for Hogan. He's just a normal guy, and then they do that finish. I mean, it was definitely one of the biggest disappointments when you consider how much time they put into building up that match, and it was arguably WCW's biggest match and one of their biggest flops, and many would argue that was the match that really started the downfall. I know some people say Hogan and Nash, the finger poke of doom, but I wouldn't really say that match was... I guess that was a disappointing match because people were expecting more, but I did, in a way, like the NWO angle where they brought the two sides together, so I'm not sure if I would agree. And also, business stayed pretty hot after that angle. What do you guys think? Virtue, what do you think about the finger poke of doom? Do you think that was one of the most disappointing matches? Were you expecting something else, or were you fine with the merger of the two NWO groups and what they did?
Any finger poke of doom is stupid. I mean, I remember even when Triple H and Shawn did something over the European title, that was written out okay, but the whole, I just, even at Bash at the Beach, I think 2000, when the whole Jarrett and Hogan thing, it just started getting. Leave it to WCW. See, that's the thing. If they didn't do the finger poke of doom, maybe you don't do finishes like that ever. And so I think it set a really bad precedent. So I wasn't a fan of it. I really wasn't.
I would have been a fan of the NWO Elite coming together if two things would have happened, or three things. If they all hadn't got injured right away, if the black and white team had been just completely wiped out. I mean, the Wolfpack Elite just drop Stevie Ray, Horace, all those guys. No, we're the NWO. We're the power. You guys suck. You're called the B team for a reason. And number three, the fact that that
was the whole point of it. That was the whole point that those guys were supposed to be phased out, and it just dragged on and on and on. And then the red guys got injured, so the whole thing just fell apart in a couple of months. And then, of course, the really stupid angles with Ric Flair getting beat up in the middle of the field, and just those really bad nitros where they had 1 hour with just skits, no wrestling matches, and that's when the ratings started to tank.
I think the biggest problem with the Wolfpack Elite storyline when the NWO came back together was the fact that it had nothing to do with the match or the storyline itself. It was Eric Bischoff in Tony's ear.
Yeah, the whole butts in the seats thing. I wanted to ask you, Charlie, what's your thoughts as far as most disappointing matches go? From what you've been watching over the recent years, what would you consider to be the top, what we've not talked about yet?
Well, if you're talking about recent years, I'd say at least at this year's WrestleMania, by far the most disappointing match was Randy Orton versus Ray Wyatt for the WWE Championship. Because I honestly don't remember anything that happened at that match, really, except for the effects that were in the ring and that whole thing. The match itself was really, really, really disappointing. It felt like a Raw or a SmackDown match, not a WrestleMania match. And that was really disappointing. If you're talking about last year's WrestleMania, definitely Dean Ambrose versus Brock Lesnar is what comes to mind.
Absolutely.
That match was incredibly disappointing. It's just, Brock Lesnar didn't want to work that night, I guess. And, that was...
That's WrestleMania. That's crazy.
Yeah, it felt like, it was a waste of a Brock Lesnar appearance. He only appears 6 times a year, and then he just goes out there and beats up Dean Ambrose in a couple minutes. And they have the stupid counter up there where the fans are counting each suplex. Yeah, it was getting old.
Wasn't Bray hurt? I think they were supposed to do a Bray Lesnar program, and Bray was hurt.
Yeah, maybe.
Remember that?
I remember something about that. But yeah, I agree about the Orton Bray Wyatt one. That was definitely really disappointing. You know, they spent so much time building that up, only for that match to be really flat with the special effects and the match really having no substance. What about the 2015 Royal Rumble match, Charlie? What were your thoughts on that match with Roman Reigns winning, with Bryan getting eliminated, and then the crowd just completely turning on the match?
I thought that Royal Rumble match was pretty shitty with Roman Reigns winning, because I think that the 2017 one actually was even worse. That actually made me cancel the network for a few months.
Oh, really?
It was that bad. Yeah. That was one of the worst Royal Rumbles I've ever seen in my life.
That's some pretty strong words. I mean, I thought that what happened in the 2017 one? Now, that's the one Orton won, right?
Yeah, they had Roman Reigns come out to put Randy Orton over as a face, basically.
Yeah,
that's why Roman was number 3.
Yeah, I mean that's bad that I'm even forgetting the details. Yeah, Roman Reigns came out at number 30, and everyone was really frustrated. They were expecting. Who were they expecting? I already forgot. They were expecting.
But I mean, the top booked baby face is the top heel, because it's getting guys like Charlie to cancel the WWE Network, which, you know, he's back. They come back. Got to get your free trial in.
Or 20.
Yeah, I came back here and there, but I actually canceled it a few days ago again.
Well, you can always get like 20 free trials or whatever. But Virtue, your thoughts on the 2015 Rumble match? I mean, that's got to be up there among the most disappointing Royal Rumbles. I mean, so many people thought Bryan...
Was that Punk's last match?
No, that was 2014 when Batista won. This was when Bryan was in the Rumble.
That's right.
Bryan wasn't even in the 2014 Rumble, but in the 2015 Rumble, you know, Bryan was in it, and fans thought Bryan was going to make his big comeback and headline WrestleMania again, and instead, he's just eliminated by Bray Wyatt, at number 10.
That's when, you know, obviously the hate for Roman started pouring in. And at that time, I was still all about Ambrose and Rollins. You know, I really didn't like Reigns after the Shield broke up and all that. So the fact that looking back at it now and the way things have changed for me personally, advocating for a guy that most of the wrestling fans don't like, I'm not upset about that finish now, because I wouldn't be able to have my material about Roman Reigns if that didn't happen. So, yeah, call me crazy. But at the time, I was wanting Bryan to win, absolutely.
Jeff?
The fact that Bryan didn't win that and had to do the Intercontinental title match instead was a complete step down for him. I thought that was complete BS and very disappointing, no question about it.
Now, speaking of Daniel Bryan, WrestleMania 28, Daniel Bryan defending the title against Sheamus. And how long was it, Jeff?
18 seconds.
18 seconds. So, I'm all for every once in a while WWE doing something out of the box where a match ends really quickly. I kind of like that idea because it adds a little bit more realism. The idea that a match could end at any time. But in this case, this was Daniel Bryan, the world champion, his time to shine, and they just made a joke of it. They basically made him a joke in that match. And it might have actually been the best thing for Bryan's career because the fans were so upset and frustrated about that the next night on Raw, they started doing the yes chants like crazy. They pretty much hijacked the show, and that forced WWE to really reconsider what they were doing with Daniel Bryan, and arguably that might have saved his career. Your thoughts, Jeff?
100% agree. However, I don't care if he was still wrestling to this day. The best wrestler on this planet in the last few years, losing 18 seconds is a complete crock of crap. End of story. I don't care if the Yes Movement grew to a global dominating thing. He should not have lost the match that quickly, period.
Yeah, and they had a simple story they could have done. They could have given everybody a 15-minute match. Sheamus would have worked okay with Bryan. They could have had AJ Lee do something and turn on Bryan to cost him the title, and you would have had a normal length match. I mean, and that's just one quick idea. Vince's shock value for a quick match, of all the matches on the card, he picks that one. That's bogus.
Exactly.
And especially with as long as WrestleManias go, he couldn't have afforded another 10 or 15 minutes. Yeah. Charlie?
Yeah, I was just going to add that match was very disappointing. I was actually sort of looking forward to that match. But in all fairness to WWE, I don't know if you guys remember, but that match actually led to a pretty decent program between Bryan and Sheamus. They had a really good 2 out of 3 falls match. I think it was over the limit. It was really good.
Yes.
I mean, that's how it is a lot of the time. It happens a lot where the match after WrestleMania ends up being better than the WrestleMania match itself. You know, WrestleMania should be where they go all out and have the best matches of the entire year, not have an okay match or do some sort of gimmick where a guy loses in 18 seconds and then the next month you come back with a much better match. Just doesn't make sense. WrestleMania is the Super Bowl of WWE. That should be where all the best matches happen. Everyone should go all out, trying to have the best match possible. It's WrestleMania. Go out there and everyone gets to try to have the WrestleMania moment. Go ahead, Charlie.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, do you guys remember when Sheamus versus Daniel Bryan, WrestleMania 27, was canceled and it was a dark match?
Yeah.
I heard that match was actually pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sure it was better than the WrestleMania 28 match. Now, speaking of really short matches, the rematch between Lesnar and Goldberg from this past Survivor Series, Charlie, what were your thoughts on that match?
I was very disappointed with that match. It was obviously just the way to promote 2K17. I think that's really what the main purpose of that match was. And it wasn't really supposed to be like a whole program between Lesnar and Goldberg. And it was just supposed to promote the game. But then it became like a whole thing with the Royal Rumble, and then they had a match at Mania. I mean, I don't know what to think about it. I thought it was very disappointing, obviously, because you pretty much had Lesnar who he ended the streak. He made John Cena essentially a jobber at SummerSlam 2014. And then he basically jobbed to Goldberg, who hasn't been seen in 11 years. So I understand, I understand why people were upset, but it did turn into something pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean,
I think.
What do you think, Jeff?
Oh, my thoughts about Billy Boy at Survivor Series. Oh, my goodness. Did we do a post show that night? We did, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, it was a mixed reaction. Some people thought it was really cool that they did something shocking, but others thought that it just completely, made Lesnar look bad. I mean, I get it. Like, anybody can win on any given night, that sort of thing. But this is the guy that ended the streak, losing to Goldberg.
The guy that ended the streak, the guy that we sat, me and the suite, you and close to the front row, and watched him just completely massacre John Cena. And Goldberg, who'd been gone for 12 years, no. Virtue. I'm done.
It was awful. No comment. I mean, let's be honest. Goldberg was gasping for air and breath. He was winded. So they did whatever they could to make him work as short. Even at the WrestleMania match, everything had to be as short as possible so he didn't pass out in the ring. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it was just smoke and mirrors, They did that purposely because Goldberg could not work a match, and they had to do that in order to have some sort of satisfying conclusion, or at least some kind of conclusion that fans would find to be interesting. And I guess it worked in a way because they had more matches after that, and Goldberg had a decent run to end his career, even though I think his what was his combined match time for his WWE return? It had to be under 10 minutes.
Well, yeah, because I think the one at Mania was just over 6, so I think grand total of under 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Owens is 26.
Now, on a similar topic, I want to bring up, Goldberg being brought back and smoke and mirrors having to be used. Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon from WrestleMania 26. This was really disappointing for me. I always said that they should have done a tag match. They should have done John Cena and Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon and Batista in a tag match where Bret would not have to do anything. It would be John Cena and Batista mainly, and then McMahon would come in and Cena would get the hot tag to Bret Hart. Bret Hart comes in, punches Vince, does a couple moves, puts on the sharpshooter, and Vince taps out. That way you hide Bret Hart's weaknesses, and he can come out there and have one last hurrah at WrestleMania. What they did here was it just totally exposed Bret that he could not do anything, and it just went on way too long. It just dragged and dragged, and I was extremely disappointed with this because
Aaron,
growing up with Bret Hart. What was that?
That should have been 18 seconds. Really.
Yeah, if any match was going to be 18 seconds, if anything was going to be 18 seconds, that one you could justify. So yeah, as a Bret Hart fan growing up, this was pretty hard to watch. After all these years about the Montreal Screwjob, all the finishes, recreating the Screwjob, for them to finally do this angle and for it to just be a dud of a match, yeah, I was pretty let down by it. Your thoughts, JM?
I was disappointed most of all in Bret himself because he said in his book, he said on his DVD that he would never, ever let Montreal be exploited for a storyline. And Vince goes, look what I got. And Bret went, okay.
Yeah. Charlie, anything you want to add to it? I know Bret Hart was a bit before your time, but...
Oh, no. Oh, well, yeah, but I actually have a very interesting perspective for this particular match. WrestleMania 26 was actually the first WrestleMania I saw live.
Oh, cool.
And back then I was like about 12 years old, and I didn't know anything about the dirt sheets. I didn't know anything about Bret Hart and his weaknesses.
I'm fucking old. Sorry for the F word. Sorry.
So I didn't know any of that. So I think I was even more disappointed than any of you because I didn't know that Bret Hart was, couldn't wrestle. So yeah, seeing that was pretty disappointing.
So you were actually expecting maybe like an actual match between those guys?
Yeah, I was a kid. You see, like when I was growing up, like watching wrestling, I didn't start watching wrestling until I was about 10, so like around 2008-ish.
Yeah.
2009 maybe. So I didn't know. So I was basically, how WWE works is that they, like the kids, they love Roman Reigns because WWE tells them to love Roman Reigns. I was kind of the same way with Cena. I was the same way with all that other stuff. So I didn't really know anything. It's just whatever WWE told me is what I listened to. So when they said Bret Hart was going to have a match against Vince McMahon, I believed them.
Yeah, and when they show the video packages and you see Bret Hart in his prime doing all this cool stuff, you think, oh, maybe he's going to come back and do all that stuff. Again, we'll see the old Bret Hart when obviously he was in no physical condition to do that stuff. So yeah, I could definitely see it from your perspective when you just go by strictly what WWE is showing you on television. And they're great with the hype. I mean, that's one thing about WWE. They're always really good at selling the pay-per-views and getting you hyped up for a show with the video packages and all that stuff. And I definitely feel Bret and Vince was one of the most disappointing matches. I think fans across the board can agree on that. Virtue, anything you want to add?
I have a match. Yeah, I'm past that one with Bret. I have a match. From WCW Thunder, April 26, 2000.
David
Arquette. Time out.
Oh, come on.
No. That was not disappointing. That was exactly what we knew was going to happen.
It was disappointing that it happened.
David Arquette, I'll concede
DDP that. Versus Jarrett and Bischoff, because they could have booked it where the belt stayed on DDP or went to Jarrett. You know what I mean? They could have had the match and then not put the belt on Arquette,
I knew the minute he walked back down the aisle, I went, oh God, no. And they did it.
Jeff, any other matches you want to add? I want to bring up another match. Triple H, for me, has had a very uneven
I was going to bring Triple H because Triple H in 2009 against Randy Orton at WrestleMania 25. And you know what? I will give full credit to Vince McMahon for screwing this one up because it was a no-holds-barred feud pigeonholed into a disqualification loses the title match. Like that's what they were working with. The matchmakers decided that if Triple H was disqualified, he was going to lose the title. So it couldn't be no holds barred. It couldn't be balls to the wall. It was pigeonholed completely, and it was arguably, I dare say, it's more disappointing than Miz and Cena from WrestleMania because it was just you had the badass, the game against the apex predator of WWE, and it could have been something really monumental, and it fell flat on its butt.
And that angle with Vince getting punted was red hot. I mean, that Shane thing kind of cooled that off a bit, but still.
Orton Orton took out the entire McMahon family. Only Stone Cold has done that before.
Yeah, I was going to say they rebounded from the Shane stuff when Orton took out Stephanie with the DDT. That was pretty intense to set up the WrestleMania.
That was white hot heat, not red hot. It was
Triple
white
H's face. I mean,
heat.
that's an all-time great wrestling gif. Triple H.
I mean, seriously, the whole thing where he's handcuffed to the rope and his face, he would like nothing more than to rip his own arm off just to get to Orton. That was so good, and the match was so bad.
Yeah, I know. What did you think of that, Charlie?
I think the biggest problem with the match wasn't necessarily the quality of the match, but where the match was placed in the card. It was the main event, and the crowd was already burned out from Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels. Yes. I think if the matches switched spots, maybe, then it would have been probably a better match, in my opinion, because, the crowd is always part of the match, in a way. And if the crowd burned out, it's very underwhelming. And I honestly felt bad for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. That's a great point. I mean, I think Jeff makes a great point, too. They needed a better story with the match itself. It should have been more hardcore. It should have been more intense. And maybe if it wasn't following Shawn Michaels and Undertaker, it would have had a better chance to succeed.
Well, it's funny, on the overrated video we did recently, I think it was Virtue that brought up the fact that Hogan was overrated, and the fact that Hogan Rock was such a good match despite Hogan being bad. And I completely disagree with that point, because if you turn off the crowd noise of Hogan versus Rock,
it was awful.
It's awful. Whereas if the crowd reaction to Hunter and Orton was deflated because of Michaels versus Undertaker. If you, like you said, if they'd switched the spots on the card, or if they'd given Orton and Hunter full reign to do whatever they needed to do, it would have been a lot better situation on either side.
I think that was Hogan's best match with The Rock. I mean, out of his whole career, I think The Rock. That if you look at Hogan, his timing was the best that it ever was in any of his matches. Now, it's not a Shawn Michaels match, but I see what you're saying, though. I get it.
And I think a spirit Randy Savage disagrees with you on that one, Virtue.
Yeah, I would say that Jericho and Triple H from WrestleMania 18 was in a similar spot, just like WrestleMania 25, where they had to follow Hogan and Rock, and the crowd was just surprisingly dead for that match, considering that it was in Canada. You would think that Jericho would get a great reaction, and Triple H, coming off of his quad injury, would get a better reaction.
Yeah, but Aaron, they screwed that up. They put Stephanie with Jericho, and that was weird. All the years he made fun of her, that just did not
and do Lucy the dog, remember that?
Yeah. Oh, God, yes.
Oh, great, now
and
I can't.
The problem was...
I was going to use that for a trivia question, now I can't.
Well, you can't, because he's got to remember it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, anyway. The fact is, all the Canadians popped for Trish Stratus, not Chris Jericho, because that was before the Jericho match. So the Canadians already popped out. They already popped their hero, Trish Stratus, so they didn't care about Jericho at that point.
Jeff, is there anything else you want to add match-wise? Anything else on your list?
I'm just trying to think.
Charlie,
I'm trying to think.
You want to add?
Go ahead, Charlie. Let me think while you
thinking.
I have a match that I'm surprised hasn't been brought up yet, and that, of course, would be Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar at Great Balls of Fire.
Ooh, that's
because
that
match. Because a lot of people were disappointed with that match, because you had Joe completely destroy Brock Lesnar, put him through a table, use his finisher, put him in the coquina clutch like 5 different times, and Lesnar keeps getting out of it, and then 1 F5, 1, 2, 3.
Well, that's what a lot of people have complained about. Jeff and Virtue gave that pay-per-view an A. I gave it a B. I think they could have done a little bit better with Joe. So I do agree with that. I like the fact that sometimes I do feel that finishers should end the match. And I hate it when we see guys kicking out of finishers all the time. But I think this was one case where it should not have happened. I think Joe should have kicked out of an F5. That's my personal opinion, at least.
All right, so there were 2 I thought of, and they both involved Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy, Vengeance 2001, the first Vengeance pay-per-view, with Lita's referee. That whole storyline was just one big... It was terrible.
And they went back to being a team the next week because it bombed so badly.
At the Rumble the following month, yeah. And then the other one, Matt Hardy versus Edge at SummerSlam, where they blood stoppage. Like, he was barely bleeding.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it wasn't PG yet. It was too much blood. This was literally a blood feud. This guy stole this guy's woman. Like, I would kill this dude. And, I'm bleeding too much, so never mind. No holds barred, man.
Yeah, that was really disappointing. I agree with you on that. Virtue, anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Yes, I have one last one, and it wasn't disappointing. It's underappreciated. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 14, and I'll tell you why.
I agree.
That's the night that Stone Cold Steve Austin got put over to the top of the company. Shawn Michaels had one of the greatest heel runs as the leader of DX that we will ever see, ever. Yep. He had the serious back injury from the casket against The Undertaker, and he still went out there, and yeah, he might have popped a couple pain pills before the match. But if you watch him walking down the hallway, and remember when they used to do the do before the match, he had whatever ring was around he kissed it. He went out there and gave a performance of his lifetime. From seeing the business from behind the curtain, there was no gutsier performance in the history of wrestling than Shawn Michaels putting Stone Cold over with that horrible, sickening back injury that he had, and it put him out for 4 years.
That was a disappointing match, but it was nobody's fault. Shawn was in bad shape.
The bottom line is, if I can call it Stone Cold, the bottom line is the top heel in the company went to the curtain, looked at the camera, and said, "This one's for you, Earl." Like, he was supposed to be a heel, and he's rooting for the guy that had an aneurysm the night before, the referee.
Well, I mean, I think that was a bit of an inside reference, though. I'm guessing most fans.
It was, but what I'm saying is the fact that Shawn Michaels was still enough sound mind where, he popped pink, but he was still sound to realize that his favorite referee was not there, and the fact that he went out there and delivered like only Shawn Michaels can do.
Did you see those bumps he took? With the back in the condition that it was in.
When Stone Cold threw Shawn into the buckle and he went upside down and went the bottom of his back first into the top turnbuckle, I cringed. I still do to this day. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, remember Steve Austin was still coming off of that pile driver from Owen Hart, so both guys were far from 100%.
Yes.
If those two guys were both at their peaks physically, I mean, that could have been an all-time classic. So that's why it was a letdown.
To touch off that, King of the Ring 97. Stone Cold versus Shawn Michaels didn't really deliver as much as it should have.
Yeah, it was more about them arguing. It was more about that. It was more about the storyline than the actual match. But anyways, guys, we got to wrap this thing up. Again, I would like to thank our special guest today, Charlie, for being on. Charlie, do you have any plugs you would like to get out there for the viewers?
I have a YouTube channel called Pro Wrestling Prick. That's where I do my wrestling reviews. So that's one channel.
That should be Virtue's name, the Pro Wrestling Prick. He might have to steal that from you, because Virtue knows how to get people worked up. Follow Virtue at NoDQ_Virtue. I'm finally getting it right now. And _ Jeff Meacham. Check out the Talk Wrestling episodes, and you can check out Virtue. It was great to have you on, Charlie. Maybe we can have you on for another video in the future. Thanks again for your contribution today, and I appreciate the viewership and the support. Thank you guys, everyone out there, for watching today's video. Stay tuned for another edition of No DQ Panel. We'll see you guys next time.